Thank you, Michael and Bob. Thanks for joining us for When the Shift Hits the Fan. We're going to be sharing a little bit about our experiences going through this past year and that disruption and the shift through it. So we'll be sharing a little bit about a way to think about the timeline, the shift that we've all gone through, and then sharing each of our stories of how this shift impacted us, both at two schools and then Christian at Zoom. And we'll save some time at the end for questions and answers. So I'm Jonathan Schmidt. I'm the Director of Innovation and Technology at the Meadowbrook School of Weston. We're joined by Christian Hansen, an account executive from Zoom, and then also Tom Drake from the coordinator of technology from the Bi-County Collaborative. And when thinking about this past year, I thought this model from Teach Thought is really helpful to think about the disruption and then the innovation cycle that's kind of spurned from that disruption. So they kind of think about this cycle in four different categories. The first one being an emergence of the disruption, then the actual impact, a phase of recalibration, and evolution. So when we think about the emergence of the disruption, you can think about relative stability. And for many of us, that might have been January and February of last year, with school kind of moving along as it has in the past. Although as we started to begin the beginning of March, that impact we could all see was quickly coming. And that's a timeline that's characterized by emotion. And I think we can all think of that, when school was canceling and we were about to go to remote, and the business world was reacting, everything else was happening. A very emotional time when that impact happened. And for many of us, that was March 13th, that Friday, when things kind of ground to a halt. And then following that, we had a period of recalibration, which is often characterized by chaos. And I think, at least for me anyway, the spring of last year, chaos is a pretty good word for it, as we tried to adapt and get systems in place to support our schools as they went fully remote in the spring. And then finally, the phase that we're all in now is that evolution phase, and which is characterized by growth. And thinking about, since this fall, how do we take what has happened and grow because of that? I'm going to launch a poll here, and let's see here. I'm going to relaunch this. But I'd love you to take a second here in this poll and respond with which part of this disruption cycle has had the greatest impact on your school or your organization. So you can use that polling feature to respond here. Is it the emergence before, the actual impact, the recalibration phase, or the evolution phase? And I see those results are coming in here. I'll give that a couple minutes. So I'll leave that poll open as I move on to the next one here, and I'll share the results with you. A little bit about myself and my context. I'm Jonathan Schmidt. I mentioned before, I'm the Director of Innovation and Technology, and also our COVID response coordinator this year at the Meadowbrook School of Weston, which is a pre-kindergarten through 8th grade independent school in Weston. We're one physical location, but we have 3 different addresses all on campus. And then we're about 307 students and about 80 staff. So for us, the shift, I'll highlight some aspects of the shift, how it looked at Meadowbrook. We had that emergence, the normal school year, although in January and February, especially, we had growing concern. We had a trip to China that our middle schoolers go on every year in the summer, every 2 years. And in January, we made the decision to cancel that trip in advance. And as January and February wore on, it was becoming clear that travel was being impacted, and we were starting to wrap our heads around that we were probably going to be going remote for a period of time. Early on, we thought it might be just a few weeks, but it definitely turned out longer than that for us all. And then on March 12th, we made, at the time we thought it was a bold decision, but we canceled school altogether for one day and had faculty come on campus for a distance learning training day for all faculty. And then through March and June, we had March 12th was the beginning of our spring break also. So we had a week of spring break to be able to plan. And we had to kind of stand up a new remote infrastructure, and we're able to dive into some new innovative programs, which we'll share about more later. And then into the summer with the evolution, we have our COVID response team, which was tasked to reopen school and planning for a new normal, knowing that we'd have students at home joining simultaneously 2 classes that are happening on campus. And then finally in the fall, opening on campus, and then taking on a phone migration where we moved over to Zoom Phone. Going to end the polling here and just show the results to that. It looks like for the majority of us, the evolution, the phase that we're in right now is the phase that's had the greatest impact on our schools. So for Meadowbrook, before we talked about being a relatively stable time. This was a picture from a digital citizenship class I was a part of the day before we shut down. And it's odd to look at a classroom like this now as we've become used to, look so entirely different than this. But as we came into March, we did launch that distance learning training day, and we had to quickly identify what was our toolkit going to be for distance learning and standardize on our platforms. So this Google Doc here will make the presentation available in the course on the website. We'll take you to our training materials on our platform. But we launched a learning management system in kindergarten through third grade using Seesaw and then also Padlet. In the fourth grade through eighth grade, we had been using Schoology already, but we standardized even more and have even more buy-in on using Schoology as our learning management system. And then for video conferencing, we went with Zoom at the time. We still feel this way. The audio video quality is just well above any competitor. Breakout rooms were such a key aspect of the way that we wanted to teach, and having that at the start right in the spring was huge for us too. And having the controls that we have in Zoom has been really helpful too. We've been able to manage, and as we needed to flex into the future with rolling in Zoom rooms and now Zoom phones, we've been really happy that we made that choice at that time to go with Zoom. And finally, we wanted a way for folks to screen share asynchronously. So we launched the tool Screencastify, which has been a fantastic tool for faculty easily record and share screencasts, as well as our students. In that spring, we had to quickly roll out a one-to-one program. We had in third through fifth grade, we have a MacBook for each student, but at the time, those devices stayed the night at campus. So our students went home for this March break without having their school devices. So we had to kind of scramble up a drive-up system where families could come and get their MacBooks. I'm sure many of you had the same kind of scramble to get devices to students as well. I also had to roll out a new remote infrastructure or provide training on remote infrastructure that we already had in place. So earlier in the fall last year, we had rolled out Cisco AnyConnect as our VPN. And for many of our office workers, they were going to be relying on that like they have never before. So we had to provide even more training and availability for that. We also rolled out a soft phone solution through our previous provider. Although it was quite expensive and difficult to manage on the admin side, and a little unuser friendly, but for folks who are office workers who rely on their phone all day, it was a lifeline and a huge aspect of their working day while they were remote. We also, before we were very email heavy, and the pandemic kind of forced us to move into Google Chat, and then later as we migrated over to Slack for more of that real-time communication. And then finally, for our tech team support, we saw a huge increase in help tickets, and we launched a daily drop-in time on Zoom where anyone could drop in and be shuttled to a breakout room with a tech team member who could help them remotely. During the spring, we were also able to take part in a couple of innovative opportunities that were able to happen because of what was going on in the spring. And one was we were able to volunteer as part of Massachusetts Face Shields. You remember back in the spring, the personal protective equipment, PPE, was in short supply. And we had our 3D printers that were sitting unused in our makerspace. We had a few faculty take those home, and they were printing the pieces for face shields and then bringing them to an organization. We had some students also who happen to have a 3D printer at home printing these as well. It was a great way to show students that community service can be still an aspect even in the midst of a crisis and in the midst of remote learning. We had wanted to launch an esports pilot for a while, and we were able to in the spring to launch our first middle school esports league. We have the students playing Rocket League, which is a rocket-powered car soccer. There's an image of it there. For those who aren't familiar, we had 8 teams facing off in 2 versus 2 Rocket League, and we were able to stream the matches live on Twitch. And for many of the students who took part of this, was the highlight of the spring and a way to give them social connections, and that a lot of the benefits of athletics in a time where that wasn't an option. We still have our, from that pilot, we've continued the league and have it running this year as well. So as we kind of capped off the year, we started to turn our attention towards the summer and preparing for the fall. And I mentioned the COVID response team was tasked with reopening school while keeping the health and safety and the academic excellence at the forefront. And as we started into that work, it became clear that we would have students at home who would need to simultaneously join live classes on campus. That was something that we had been wanting to avoid in the past, but through our work in the summer, it became clear that there wasn't is not ideal, but there was no way to avoid it. And I was able to present with another organization on our reopening plans and thinking about reopening with agility and resiliency through technology. And I have a link to that in the presentation, which we'll provide on the website as well, and a video recording of that too, of our thinking around that time. And I mentioned when we knew we'd have students at home joining live into classes, we were looking for a solution. And originally we had been looking at Meeting Owl or Swivel. We had quite a few of them on campus and we were trying them out. But when we started to experiment with Zoom rooms, we were blown away with just the feature set and the familiarity for our faculty who are already used to running classes in Zoom fully remote. Now they could bring those skill set over. So we ended up deploying 37 rooms in a similar model as to Zoom's DIY hybrid classroom guide. That guide has changed a little bit over the year, but basically if you bring your own displays, a touchpad controller, in our case, we used iPads that we were retiring, and cameras, you can create your own Zoom room, which is specifically designed to help bring people who are remote into a group setting. At the time, we found really difficult finding pan tilt zoom cameras. We were able to find 10 views, but had quite a few issues with those. And now we've settled on Go Electric devices, which I put a link to here, which are pretty affordable considering the feature set. And while we tested the audio in empty classrooms before school started and felt like we had the audio under control, once we put actual bodies in the classroom, we found the acoustics are totally different. And believe it or not, students are a little louder than you might expect when they're in a classroom, even when they're at distance. So so our students at home were having a hard time hearing the classroom, and we quickly pivoted and found out about Catchbox actually through Zoom. And added the Catchbox microphones, which solved our issues. So basically we have the teachers wearing a wearable mic, and then there's a passable mic that the teacher can put on the table in front of a student, so that a student who's talking to the class can be heard at home as well. And our teachers have really loved the Catchboxes. I see them being used even after we not supporting students at home as a way to boost the audio in larger classrooms as well. Then we moved into the fall and we went through a Zoom phone migration. We moved away from TCX or DSCI as they used to be for savings. And we found that we would no longer need a dedicated T1 line for our phone system. So we moved over 83 phone users and 31 room phones, which are called common area phones in Zoom. And we needed to upgrade our hardware. We had some pretty old Polycom hardware in place. So we went with the Polycom VVX 101s and the 250s. And we found the migration was super easy. We ported our numbers over. There was a lot of nervousness for us, but we were really put at ease with working with the Zoom team who has migrated much larger organizations than ours. And the cost savings that we saved from moving from our old carrier and doing away that T1 line, we were able to take that budget and put it towards increased broadband. In fact, this week their Comcast is on site running a new fiber line to our campus. And that move has been a fantastic move that's really going to pay off not only in the phones, but in an increased broadband for everyone on campus. So when I think about the lessons that Meadowbrook learned from the shift, I think the first one is that being prepared is so critical, and that investments that we make in professional development and infrastructure will pay off always, but especially in a time of a crisis. I also think about meeting human needs, and we teach the human-centered design process to our students and use it internally with our faculty, design thinking. but using that process to find and meet actual human needs. Sometimes the needs that we found during the time were not what we expected, and we need to come in with that mindset of actually uncovering the needs that are there. And then finally, continually reevaluating our systems and being ready to question and revert on past decisions. And I think as tech directors, we often have to, along the life cycle of innovation and change, we have to tear down a system that we had built previously. So when we moved from Zoom phones, it was the right decision at the time to use the provider that we used before, but now it was the right time to make a decision and go in a different direction. And that can be sometimes hard when if you were the one who had brought that old system in before. So those are some of the lessons that we learned through this shift. I'm going to pass it over here to Tom, who's going to share a little bit more about his story at his organization.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Tom Drake, the coordinator of technology at Bi-County Collaborative, which has been introduced twice, so it's kind of redundant. But some background information on Bi-County is we're one of about 25 special education collaboratives in Massachusetts. Our entire population is special ed students who, are, for a variety of reasons, couldn't be supported in district. We have 13 physical locations, 11 of which are in other school districts. It's a leased classroom space where, if students are able, they'll take and participate in regular mainstream classes and then come back to us for whatever additional needs they need in our classrooms. We have about 213 students and about 185 staff. So our shift timeline was similar to what's been outlined twice before, up until right around Friday, March 13th. It was kind of day-to-day troubleshooting. And then right when everything shut down and everything, it's what I prefer to call, IT hell weeks, where no matter who you spoke to, anybody in the IT world, it was basically 24/7 as fast as they could, and it wasn't fast enough to just try and keep up with everything. So for us, it kind of highlighted weaknesses in different aspects of our infrastructure, but specifically for our website and our student information system, posting notices and looking up family contact information. Our existing systems, while they worked well prior to this, without having people on site to do things, it was a little bit rigid. And so just like everyone else, we moved into mitigation phase after the first couple of weeks, where we chose some solutions, got them in place as quickly as possible. We did some research for longer term projects, and then moved into our regular new school year planning come May, June timeframe, and actually even started that in April a little bit. Started getting those major implementations put in place over the summer, and we've actually continued them right through up until today, and they're going to continue right through until the start of next school year. So as far as our existing infrastructure, what it looked like, we were actually in a pretty good position, with the exception of one or two things. We already had in place Meraki firewalls with VPN for all of our staff. Our staff and student devices, we were one-to-one for students with Chromebooks in most of our programs. There were a couple of intensive programs where previously the students hadn't been assigned a Chromebook, but we did have enough spares to take and cover what was needed for the additional staff and students in those programs. Our teaching staff and a lot of our professional staff already had Windows 10 laptops, so we were able to leverage those. But the one system that truly was lacking, even though the shift highlighted the weakness in our website and student information system, where we truly found lacking was in our phone system, which was really inflexible in terms of when everyone needed to go remote, as well as being really expensive. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Our support, we saw a large increase in help desk tickets and calls. Was able to take and leverage Chrome Remote Desktop to take and support most of those calls and requests, both from staff and students and their families. And so, as far as our phone system, our existing phone system, we had challenges even before the shift happened. In terms of some of our program locations, we didn't have sites where we were able to take and implement the BICO phones. And that wasn't really from a lack of support from the district staff. It more had to do with the structure of our existing provider, where they were very rigid in terms of how the system needed to be set up in order for it to work. And actually with certain firewall vendors, it actually wouldn't take, and even with the correct rules in place based on their documentation, the old phone system just wouldn't work. So we didn't have true intersite communication for 4 or 5 of our programs. We were forced to take and request, and everyone was gracious enough to allow us to use the in-district phone system. Also, in terms of our old phone system, there was really an inconsistent design that was in place. We had a lot of different phone number types where different area codes, different starting 3 or middle 3 digits in the phone number, and extensions had been assigned completely randomly. It was nice that it was a 2-digit extension, but it was all over the place. And having the 2-digit extension actually wound up interfering with the way that the auto attendants have been set up. In terms of when we had any kind of emergencies for communication, that's something that's a little bit different for us at BICO, especially in our in-district locations, because, okay, we have a medical emergency of some kind where we need to take and call 911, and we would take and need to notify building administration as well as the BICO administration. That needed to be 2 additional phone calls in addition to whoever was speaking to 911 and whoever was attending to the student in need. And also for students who were attending mainstream classes, if there was something like a fire alarm that would take and go off, then that could pose its own challenge in making sure that everyone was out safely. So that's partly just the nature of being a collaborative. So what were our challenges through the pandemic so far? And when the shift really happened, the biggest one that was unique to us was coordinating district building access. Usually it would just be like, hey, I need to get into the building, or you would go down and sign into the front desk. But coordinating with all of our districts, and they did a really good job helping us out. But that was something that took a little bit of extra legwork. Making policy adjustments, everyone went through, we were one-to-one in our classrooms, but our students, just like at Meadowbrook, were not taking the devices home. So we needed to take and collect the devices, adjust our policies, get new policies in place, getting parents to sign off with all of those policy adjustments, and then setting up the distribution, scheduling the pickup, creating tracking sheets. And in a lot of cases, we took and leveraged our paraprofessionals because they previously had been doing in-home services. They were taken and willing to take and do home deliveries of the Chromebooks and worksheets. Obviously, we needed to provide training to staff and students in terms of some of the solutions that we took and implemented. And then the communication really was the biggest challenge that we had, where we had near zero communication via BICO phone numbers. And so with our old phone system, the challenges that we saw during the pandemic or during the first couple of weeks was really parent communication, because our old phone system couldn't be used from home. A lot of our staff personal phone numbers were compromised. They were calling parents from them, texting them, etc. Along with everyone going remote, one of the things that was done here at BICO was we took and put a spending freeze to make sure that we could meet payroll for everybody. And that went in place in March, in like the first or second week. And so while we found with our old phone system did have an iOS and Android app that was available, it was going to be an additional $5 per user per month, beyond what we were already paying. And so that simply was not an option for us with the spending freeze in place. And also they didn't have any kind of Windows or Chrome OS application to take and leverage as well. Um, our old phone system was in place, was under contract up until March of this year. And even with the app that was available, there wasn't texting capability on that old system. And so what were the solutions that we took and put in place for us, for our teaching staff? For learning management, we leveraged Google Classroom. About half of our teachers have been trained on Google Classroom previously. So in reality, about a quarter of them were using it. And that left 3/4 of our staff and students needing to get trained. For classroom management, we had in place already good infrastructure there through GoGuardian filtering. And then for the classroom portion, GoGuardian Teacher. All the staff know and love that program. And so why do we choose Zoom for our video conferencing? Well, it's got an easy, intuitive interface. I've personally been using it since about 2017, which is earlier than a lot of people. And I found that it had some of the best controls, specifically as it relates to classroom management, which is really important to be able to continue the learning cycle of while a teacher is trying to present a lesson. The mute alls and the participants can unmute themselves features I felt were really important, as well as allowing and disallowing chat, and the students not being able to join a meeting that was ended previously. Um, One of the pieces of software that we leveraged that I should have put on this slide, and I failed to do so, was actually our interactive whiteboard software. We have a number of ClearTouch boards, which comes with each ClearTouch board gets 10 licenses of their Note 3 software. So we leveraged that for in combination with Zoom for our synchronous learning. And then because all of our teachers had a Windows 10 laptops, we used the built-in Windows screen recorder to take and record sessions that way. So there is an article linked as to how to take and use that. It's actually based off of the Xbox controls. And so when it came to middle of the summer, over the summer, this is actually one of the slides from our welcome back, and I kind of highlighted all of the changes that were put in place during the adjustment or the mitigation phase. We took and purchased Cami, which especially for math lessons is great for PDF annotation over all the existing PDF worksheets that everyone has. We took and purchased Pear Deck, which is interactive Google Slides or interactive PowerPoint presentations. Really helped to ensure that student engagement was ongoing, that you weren't just getting everyone's video turned off while you're teaching. It helped to make sure that engagement continues. Some of the others are pretty obvious here, but SysCloud for G Suite backup was one of the other important pieces. And so also during the welcome back, we wanted to take and ensure all of our staff was aware of the software solutions that we had available for all of our students. So most of these are going to be familiar to everyone, but one that I did want to highlight is Virtual Job Shadow, which is basically career paths. It's designed for middle school and high school students, but especially high school students. It outlines all of those different career paths that are available.
Just to let everybody know, we've got about 8 minutes left.
Okay. So long-term solutions in late fall and through until our go live, we were looking at different phone systems. So Zoom Phone, we took and finished the implementation February 16th. And I mentioned that we had highlighted areas of improvement in our student information system and our website, which are tied together. So we're in the process of taking and implementing those, along with, interestingly enough, ClassLink, one of the presentation sponsors. That's something that we're looking to leverage, because the biggest issue or most common support request was login issues and knowing exactly where to go. And Jonathan mentioned, being willing to change, previous solutions that have been selected, looking at Lightspeed Filter, Lightspeed Classroom, in addition to GoGuardian, is one of the things. And so I'm going to put up our second poll question, which was, which communication tool did you use most during the pandemic? Jonathan, if you could put that up real quick, and I'll take and go through, continue going through my slides as those answers come in. And so our implementation, what did that look like? Why Zoom? There were a couple of different reasons for it. We looked at a number of different vendors when we were looking at replacing our phone system. But the biggest piece for us was the ability to license every single staff member with at least an internal only extension. And we felt that, especially during those emergency situations like a fire alarm that I highlighted earlier, we'd be able to take and place a phone call to the staff, or just do a quick chat, instant message to them and to check in, and that would be possible. Also, the familiarity with the Zoom app already. When you add Zoom Phone, it just adds a phone tab to the app. And so when you're setting this up, one of the things that you need to understand is the 5 different license types. The direct inward dialing for an auto attendance, the Zoom Phone Basic, which is internal only, so you can't transfer an external phone call to the users. But for paraprofessionals and staff who wouldn't have day-to-day interactions with parents and families, it's a perfect solution for them. Zoom Pro is just an extension. Metered is meter phone calls, but it's unlimited text. And so, I covered it a little bit. We actually have 84 total phone lines. 32 of them are for our teachers and counselors, and our program directors are like building principals, and our main admin staff. And then in our classrooms, we chose to take and go with the metered solution. So our teachers do have the ability to text parents, but they also take and don't make as many phone calls to the parents. So I'm gonna take and end the polling and share the results.
We're at the 5-minute level, so if people have questions, they can put them in chat, which will also be recorded.
Okay. And so the Zoom team, as mentioned before, sent me through a real nice, relatively quick basic setup. And it starts with the sites. You define your office hours, you define your auto attendance, you bring in your numbers, which are easy to port. And then you enter in your users and assign them to sites. You can assign the extension right away. So if your phone numbers aren't ready, that doesn't matter. You can assign the phone numbers afterwards. It's really, really straightforward and simple. And on the hardware side, we also chose the Poly line, because when we were looking at all the different vendors, the Poly VVX line specifically was supported across all the different vendors. So we chose the 150 for classroom. It's basic black and white phone. The 250 is what's recommended for by Zoom and by a lot of people, because it does have a USB port on the side, so you can take and make it wireless if you need to, or add a headset. And then we use the 450 for our secretaries, because those are the ones that support the expansion boxes for all the different phone extensions. We have 2 different Zoom rooms, one for each of our main conference rooms at the 2 sites that we do manage. One's a really nice Poly X30 with the TC8. You can see both of those here. And the other one is made up of the the Zoom room that's piecemeal with a webcam, PC, microphone, and an old iPad. And so what were the realized benefits that we had by switching to Zoom Phone? It was accessibility, being able to be reached how you like, when you like, both remotely and in person. By setting the office hours, then you aren't receiving calls after hours. It goes directly to voicemail, so you can still see the phone call, be able to respond to it, but you don't have to take and respond until you're back in the office. We do see an estimated realized cost savings of about $500 a month. Increased communication in terms of being able to reach staff, as I mentioned, either by calling them with the internal only extension or by sending a quick chat. Enhanced 911, where as soon as a 911 call is placed, our program directors will immediately receive an email response saying, hey, so-and-so at this site took and placed a 911 phone call, so we can respond immediately. And then simplicity for voicemails, mixed calls, contacts, chat, text message, etc., are all available in one app. And so going to turn it over to Christian because I know we're running short on time, but that was the end of what I had.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And I know that we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to be super quick. Just wanted to introduce myself. I see the names that are on the squares, these boxes here, and there's some familiar faces. I want to give a special shout out to Karen at Norton, who was my first person that I spoke with, and was super happy to get you guys squared away. And for me, that was a real beginning of all of this. So thank you and good to see you again. I live here in Newburyport. I help to support K-12 schools throughout Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine. And so if you do need my contact information, it is below here. I wanted to honestly just say thank you for this opportunity to support you folks, you tech directors who've been at the front lines, who've had more press than anybody else in the schools this year, and have had to pivot and adjust and do that matrix move in order to really come through smelling like a rose. So thank you for allowing Zoom to support you as you persevered throughout the entire year. I have some more information here. I'm not going to get into that, but I wanted to open this up for questions about Zoom Phone, Zoom Rooms, Zoom meetings. You can either email me directly, you can email Tom directly, you can email Jonathan directly. I think that they've been wonderful partners with us and sharing what their experience has been like for other folks. So I'll leave that right here, but I do want to say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Mike to bring us home.